my name is Alexandria Fisher. I'm a Master's in Public Health candidate with the Colorado School of Public Health, and I'll be presenting on the 3 Mile Island nuclear accident. As an overview, 3 Mile Island is a nuclear power plant in south central Pennsylvania and was the site of the largest commercial nuclear accident in U.S. history. Water pumps that cooled the radioactive fuel in the Unit 2 reactor malfunctioned. The reactor was experiencing a loss of coolant. However, the plant staff did not know or understand this and made a series of decisions that actually made the problem worse. Nuclear fuel began melting through its metal container. A geyser of steam erupted from the top of the plant containing trace amounts of radioactive gases. This incident resulted in a partial meltdown that continued to release radioactive gases into the environment. Inside the unit, a large hydrogen bubble was being created by the melting fuel. Officials worried that the bubble could cause an explosion and release even more radioactive material into the atmosphere. Along with possible negative health effects, this accident fueled public fears about nuclear power and brought sweeping changes to the nuclear power plant operations, radiation protection, emergency response planning, human factors engineering, and many other areas. Since the accident, no new nuclear power plants have been built in the United States. The accident began on Wednesday, March 28, 1979. Through this timeline, we will see how key players responded to a minor mechanical malfunction and how emergency response failed to adequately address the situation. It began at 0400. The indicator light in the control room showed that the signal had been sent to close the valve, even though the valve remained open. Relying on this indicator light, the control room operators believed that the valve had closed. Meanwhile, they ignored other indications that the valve was actually open and that temperatures in the core were rising. The Emergency Core Cooling System, ECCS, automatically came on, but the operators turned it off because they did not understand what was actually taking place. By doing this, they severely restricted the amounts of water that was being injected to the core by the ECCS. As a result, a significant portion of the core was left uncovered for an extended period of time. If the operator had let the ECCS come on and perform the operation it was designed to do, the accident would have just been a minor glitch in the life of the plant. At 0600, a conference call between Metropolitan Edison and Babcock & Wilcox, the company that designed and built the reactor. They were both still under the impression that the valve was closed, and since there was no radiation alarm and no fuel pellets were rupturing, the representatives were unaware that the core was in serious danger. At 0650, the operators in the control room realized that the radiation levels were abnormal and alerted authorities outside the plant. As required, William Zaway, a senior operator, calls Dauphin County and informs them that there is a site emergency. At 0702, Zaway calls the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency and informs the watch office, Clarence Deller, that the reactors have been shut down and that there is a large amount of radiation in the reactor room. Zaway, however, does not continue to explain further since Deller was not trained in the technical details of the nuclear reactor operations. At 0704, PEMA notifies BRP and all counties within a 5-mile radius of the plant as required. At the same time, the first call is made to the NRC, but the office was not open. The operator on duty was still on his way to work, and he decided not to answer the page that he received until he arrived at the office. At 0708, PEMA contacts Dauphin County. At 0710, Metropolitan Edison notifies the U.S. Department of Energy of the situation. Although Metropolitan Edison does not request immediate assistance, the radiological assistance team is placed on standby. At 0715, Gary Miller, the station manager in Metropolitan Edison's senior executive, arrives and establishes and sends out a team to monitor radiation both on and off site as required by their emergency plan. At 0715, buildings are evacuated due to the presence of radiation. At 0724, Miller escalates the event from a site emergency to a general emergency. This means that the incident poses a threat to the health and safety of the general public. At 0724, Colonel Orrin Henderson, the director of PEMA, first hears of the incident from one of his operations officers. At 0730, BRP learns that the general emergency has been declared and requests verification of on and off-site radiation monitoring. At 07:36, Pima is informed of the general emergency status and are warned that they should be ready to evacuate Brunner Island and Goldsboro, both of which are within near proximity to the plant. It is also recommended that Pima initiates preparedness for emergency evacuations. At 07:40, the operator at the NRC receives the message informing him of the incident at the plant. At 07:50, Henderson informs Governor Thornburg of the incident, who proceeds back to his breakfast meeting after the phone call. At 0800, the pipes going between the buildings are shut off and the containment building is isolated. Some radioactivity has leaked into the atmosphere when the operators open the pipes. At 0820, Henderson informs the Lieutenant Governor Scranton of the incident. At 0825, reporters become aware of the situation. At 0850, the NRC site team and the emergency center is operational. At 0906, the Associated Press releases the first news story about 3 Mile Island, but they do state that there is no radiation leakage. At 0915, the White House is informed of the events that are taking place at 3 Mile Island, and President Jimmy Carter eventually hears the news. At 0937, Scranton briefs Thornburg on the situation and reports that there has been some release of radiation into the environment. He stresses the importance of informing the public about the situation, because he recognizes the unique fear that radiation can cause because of its unknown consequences. At 1000, the first officials arrive from the NRC. At 10:55, Scranton gives a press conference and quotes Metropolitan Edison as stating, "There is no danger to public health and safety," although he admits that a small amount of radiation has been released, but reports that all safety equipment is functioning. At 1100, all non-essential people are ordered to leave the island. The DOE begins monitoring radiation levels via helicopter flights. At 1300, Metropolitan Edison holds its first press conference. They claim that at that point it was not a very serious incident and they were not in danger of a meltdown. At 1430, Metropolitan Edison met with state officials for the first time. The director of BRP reports that the release of radioactive material had occurred between 1100 and 1330 and stated that Metropolitan Edison had not provided appropriate notification. At 1630, Scranton holds his second press conference of the day and announces that the incident is much more complex than Metropolitan Edison had initially led them to believe. He stated that there had been a release of radioactive material, but he assured them that it was not at harmful levels. At 2045, Scranton meets with the emergency response team of the DOE, and they finally established that there's a slight chance of a meltdown, but they would still have plenty of time to order and carry out an evacuation. Scranton debriefs Thornburg on the situation. At 2200, Scranton holds his final press conference of the day. He reports that the auxiliary building containing the radioactive material was being vented and some radiation was escaping into the atmosphere. The NRC official reports that there is no human error detected at that point and that the reactor was in safe condition. At 2300, Thornburg calls his first full briefing of the situation. The potential for the core meltdown was not discussed. At the same time, Walter Cronkite reports to the world that a breakdown in an atomic power plant in Pennsylvania today is probably the worst nuclear accident to date. The following days, the public is experiencing conflicting news stories, reports, and press conferences, and there's a lot of speculation around what actually transpired. Different key players continue meeting with each other in person. The community is generally unsure of how to react or who to trust, and eventually 140,000 residents evacuate the area. The key players are still unsure of the danger of the hydrogen bubble that formed on day 3 of the incident. On Friday, March 31st, 1979, Governor Thornburg gave a press conference stating, "No evacuation order is necessary at this time. My earlier recommendation that pregnant women and preschool children stay out of the area within 5 miles of the plant will remain in effect until at least sometime tomorrow, when we will expect to provide you with further advice. And early advice that people living within 10 miles of the plants try to remain indoors will expire at midnight." Now we will evaluate the key players and participants in the response to this nuclear accident. First, we have the Governor's Office, then the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC, Metropolitan Edison, the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency, PEMA, and the Union of Concerned Scientists. The key decision makers in the governor's office are William Scranton, the lieutenant governor, and of course, Dick Thornburgh, the governor, both of whom are responsible for the protection and safety of Pennsylvania. The lieutenant governor serves as the head of the state emergency council and transmits information from the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency to the governor on state emergencies. If the emergency requires a higher level of response, the governor declares a state of emergency and requests federal assistance from the state. The governor also issues all evacuation orders except during a localized immediate crisis. Through the timeline, we saw that there are gaps in information were inadequate reports on technical status of the plant, inadequate knowledge regarding the scientific consequences of radiation on human health, and inadequate knowledge of the capacity of the local government to protect their respective communities. Months after the incident on July 19, 1979, Governor Thornburgh enacted the Governor's Energy Council. The council's purpose was to ensure energy security through planning, development, and conservation. It was designed to coordinate energy policies with state agencies, local governments, businesses, and consumers. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The key decision makers there are Joseph Hendry, the chair, and Harold Denton, the director of the Office of Nuclear Reactor Regulation. At the time of the accident, the NRC required that two types of operators be present at nuclear power plants, the reactor operator and the senior operator. However, federal law did not require that plants have an emergency plan before being licensed. The NRC was responsible for assisting the government in developing emergency response plans for nuclear facilities. The NRC does not have the authority to require states to develop plans or disapprove state plans once they're created. The NRC is responsible for collecting and evaluating the facts surrounding an accidental release of radioactive material from a nuclear facility such as this one. We saw that they had inadequate knowledge of the plant operations and inadequate knowledge of the local area, community, and organizations. Metropolitan Edison. The key decision maker here is Walter Kreitz, who is the president. He must comply with the rules and regulations for nuclear power plant operation implemented by the NRC. The control room operators were all given 6 to 12 months of training, followed by significant oral and written exams on the operation of Unit 2. Moreover, all operator tactics practiced on the simulator once every 2 years, despite not being required by the NRC. At Metropolitan Edison, they failed to adequately prepare and implement an emergency response plan and failed to communicate with other key players the seriousness of the accident. It is also important to know that Unit 2 was pushed into service in 1978 in order to qualify for $18 million in tax investment credits and $10 million in depreciation deductions. This was a clear, strong incentive to get the plant working fast. The Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency. The key decision maker here is the director, Orrin Henderson. His responsibilities include developing and keeping current a comprehensive emergency management plan and a program for the Defense Commonwealth designed to provide for the protection of life and property under both attack and natural disaster conditions. He must also issue planning guidance, coordination of the state in response to nuclear incidents, maintain emergency communications facilities, operate state emergency operations center, emergency public information, coordination of state agencies and departments. If ordered by the governor, he must manage an evacuation and provide for all those who refuse to leave. PEMA must be notified in the case of a nuclear incident, and PEMA must notify the BRP, counties within a 5-mile radius of the plant, other state agencies in neighboring states, implement the course of action proposed by the BRP in response to release of radiation, activate and manage the Emergency Operations Center, guide and direct counties and state agencies. Through this incident, we saw that their personnel lacked information regarding the risk of exposure to radiation and failed to give adequate direction in response to the incident. Lastly, we have the Union of Concerned Scientists with their director, Daniel Ford. His responsibilities include guiding group activities that include research, public education, and lobbying in the support of public policy issues that require scientific knowledge. While they are not key response players, 2 months before the accident, members of the group testified in congressional hearings that 16 plants, including 3 Mile Island, must be shut down for repairs. And 9 days, just 9 days before the nuclear accident, the director stated that the nuclear plant was at risk more than it was worth. Now we will evaluate the ICS and public health role. Incident command system was not implemented in this accident, which is exhibited by a lack of control and coordination and poor communication during the accident. The emergency response plan should have included a clear communication structure that coordinated notification of key players and officials, public announcements, and press releases. Public health officials should have also demonstrated a stronger understanding of the effects of radioactive releases on the community's health. After the incident, we saw various examples of community resilience. 3 Mile Island became a symbol for the anti-nuclear movement. There was rapid and widespread community mobilization. Activists circulated petitions for the closure of the plant. There were public meetings, hearings, and legislative lobbies, and there were as much as 7 key protest organizations as a result. In April 6, 1979, there was a rally on the Capitol steps of Harrisburg attended by 1,000 people. A month later, there was a rally in DC where residents of 3 Mile Island were given special places of honor. In 1971, there was a class action suit against 3 Mile Island. It was filed by citizens who won $25 million in an out-of-court settlement. There were also consequential changes as a result of the 3 Mile Island accident. Analysis of the accident led to changes in the regulation of the nuclear power plants in the United States. Federal requirements for safety controls and emergency planning became much more stringent, and officials imposed a temporary moratorium on the licensing of all nuclear reactors. The accident also resulted in required design changes for nuclear plants that created higher costs and longer construction times. As a result, construction of nuclear reactors steeply declined, and no nuclear plants started after 1974 have been completed in the United States. And here we have our reference. Thank you for listening.